The July sun was already brutal by 9 in the morning, the kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer and turned front lawns into a test of endurance. Tyler Mason pushed his commercial mower up the trailer ramp, sweat already soaking through his shirt, and checked his phone for the day's schedule. 6 lawns, all in the Riverside Meadows subdivision, all due before 4 o'clock. His best friend Jake was loading the edger into the truck, moving slower than usual, nursing a pulled muscle from yesterday's work. "Last house is that corner lot on Maple Street," Jake said, squinting at the address on Tyler's phone, "the one with the motorcycle in the driveway." Tyler nodded, remembering the place. They'd driven past it a dozen times, and it always stood out. Not because it was run down exactly, but because it was different. No decorative mailbox, no flower beds, no pristine white stones lining the driveway. Just a simple ranch house with weathered siding and a front yard that had gone too long without attention. And always, that massive black and chrome Harley-Davidson parked like a statement under the carport. They knocked out the first 5 lawns by 2:30, working in the practiced rhythm they'd developed over 2 summers. Tyler ran the mower while Jake handled edging and trimming. Then they'd swap for the next yard to keep from burning out. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid better than anything else available to 16-year-olds, and Tyler needed every dollar. His mom's multiple sclerosis had been getting worse, and the new medication her doctor wanted to try cost $3,000 a month, even with insurance. Tyler's lawn care business was supposed to cover his college fund, but lately he'd been thinking about redirecting that money somewhere more urgent. When they pulled up to the corner lot on Maple Street, Tyler sat in the truck for a moment, studying the property. The grass was tall, almost knee-high in places, and the edges along the driveway had gone wild with weeds. It would take them an extra hour, easy, maybe more. He checked his watch, 4:15. His mom would be expecting him home by 5:30 to help with dinner and her evening medication. The front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was in his 50s, built solid but weathered, with a gray beard and forearms covered in faded tattoos. He wore a black t-shirt with a Veterans of Foreign Wars logo and jeans that had seen better days. He stood there watching them, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Tyler grabbed his clipboard and climbed out of the truck, Jake following. "Mr. Kowalski?" Tyler called out, walking toward the porch. The man nodded once. "That's me." "Tyler Mason. We're here for the scheduled lawn service." Tyler checked his paperwork, even though he knew what it said. "Looks like this is a one-time appointment. Standard mow and trim?" "About that," Kowalski said, and something in his voice made Tyler's stomach drop. "I need to cancel. Can't afford it right now." Tyler glanced back at the yard, then at the man on the porch. Up close, he could see more details, the way Kowalski held himself, rigid and careful, like he was always ready for something to go wrong. The faded Hells Angels patch on the leather vest hanging by the door, the Purple Heart license plate on the motorcycle. "When did you schedule this?" Tyler asked, keeping his voice neutral. 2 weeks ago, Kowalski admitted, "before my hours got cut at the warehouse. I called your number yesterday, left a message." Tyler pulled out his phone and checked. There was a voicemail he hadn't listened to, time-stamped 6:47 p.m. the previous evening, well after he'd finished work and gone home to help his mom. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't see this." "Not your fault," Kowalski said, "but I can't pay you. I can do it myself, just haven't had time." Tyler looked at the yard again, at the grass that was probably violating 3 different HOA regulations, at the man who stood on his porch with his arms crossed and his pride intact, refusing to make excuses. Tyler thought about his mom, about medical bills and pride, and the difference between needing help and asking for it. "Tell you what," Tyler said, making a decision he'd probably regret when he checked his bank balance later. "We're already here, truck's already unloaded. Let us knock it out, no charge." Kowalski's expression hardened. "I don't take charity." "It's not charity," Tyler said quickly. "It's a scheduling error on our end. We should have checked messages, and honestly, sir, if we leave now, we're just driving home. Might as well do something useful." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely false either. Jake shot him a look that said, "Are you serious?" but didn't contradict him. Kowalski studied Tyler for a long moment, those weathered eyes seeing more than Tyler was comfortable with. Finally, he nodded. "All right." but I owe you. That's not negotiable." "Yes, sir," Tyler said, because he could tell that was the only answer that would be accepted. They worked for 90 minutes in the punishing heat. The yard was worse than it looked, full of hidden obstacles and uneven ground that made the mowing slow and careful. But gradually, it transformed. The wild grass fell away in neat rows. The edges became crisp lines. The driveway emerged from its border of weeds looking almost new. Kowalski came out twice, once with cold water and actual glasses, not plastic cups, and once with a plate of cookies his neighbor had apparently brought over. He didn't talk much, just watched them work with that same unreadable expression, but Tyler got the sense he was seeing everything, cataloging every detail. When they finished, Tyler knocked on the door to let Kowalski know they were done. The man came out and walked a slow circle around the yard, nodding approval. "Good work," he said. "Professional." "Thank you, sir," Tyler replied. He was loading the last of the equipment when Kowalski called out to him. "You said you owe me nothing," Kowalski said, "but I need your name and number anyway, in case I can afford it next time." Tyler pulled out a business card, one of the cheap ones he'd printed at the library. Tyler's Lawn Care, in simple block letters, his cell number underneath. Kowalski took it, studied it like it was something important, then slipped it into his wallet. "You a good kid?" Kowalski asked suddenly. The question caught Tyler off guard. "I try to be, sir." "Why'd you really do this?" Kowalski pressed. "Free work cuts into your profit. You running a business or a charity?" Tyler thought about lying, about keeping it simple, but something about the way Kowalski asked, the directness of it, made him tell the truth. "My mom's sick. MS. I'm saving up to help with her treatment. Every lawn counts." He paused, then added, "But she also taught me that being decent to people costs less than being cruel. So when I saw your yard and your license plate, I figured you'd probably earned the help." Kowalski's expression shifted, something like respect crossing his face. "Your mother raised you, right?" "Yes, sir." "She did." Kowalski reached out and shook Tyler's hand, the grip firm and deliberate. "I won't forget this," he said. Tyler nodded, climbed into his truck, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, he could see Kowalski still standing in his driveway, watching them go, the business card still in his hand. Jake waited until they were 2 blocks away before he spoke. "You know we just worked 90 minutes for free, right? That's $120 we're not getting." "I know," Tyler said. "And your mom's prescription is due next week." "I know," Tyler said again. "So why'd you do it?" Tyler didn't answer right away. He drove past the neat rows of identical houses, the perfect lawns and the pristine driveways, and thought about the man with the purple heart plate and the empty wallet and the pride that wouldn't let him accept charity. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because I hope if my mom and I ever need help, someone would do the same for us." Jake nodded slowly. "Fair enough." That night, Tyler helped his mom with dinner and her medication, then sat at the kitchen table doing paperwork for the business. His phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "HOA meeting tomorrow night. Denton's asking about problem properties again. You know he means Kowalski's place." Tyler stared at the message, a knot forming in his stomach. Craig Denton was the HOA president, a real estate lawyer who treated the neighborhood bylaws like scripture and took personal offense at anything that lowered property values. He'd been complaining about Kowalski's yard for months, sending violation notices and threatening fines. Now that the yard was fixed, Tyler hoped that would be the end of it, but something told him it wouldn't be. He texted back, "Let me know what happens." Then he closed his laptop, kissed his mom goodnight, and tried not to think about business cards and wallets, or the way Kowalski had said, "I won't forget this," like it was a promise. 3 days passed. Tyler and Jake worked through their schedule, mowing lawns and trimming hedges, and trying to stay ahead of the brutal summer heat. On Thursday evening, Jake showed up at Tyler's house with news. "HOA meeting was last night," Jake said, dropping into a kitchen chair. "Denton went after Kowalski hard. Said the yard was better, but the motorcycle's an eyesore. The house needs painting, and the whole property's bringing down neighborhood values." Tyler's mom looked up from her book, frowning. "Can the HOA actually force someone to get rid of a motorcycle?" "Not directly," Jake said, "but they can fine him for every little violation until he can't afford to stay. Denton's pushing for weekly inspections. Tyler felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. That's not right. Kowalski's a veteran. He's living on warehouse wages. They're targeting him because he doesn't fit their perfect picture. I know, Jake said. Mrs. Nguyen stood up for him at the meeting. Said he helps her carry groceries and fixed her fence last winter, but Denton shut her down. Said personal feelings don't override property standards. Tyler's mom set down her book, and even through the fatigue that never quite left her face anymore, her eyes were sharp. What are you thinking, Tyler? I don't know yet, Tyler admitted, but there's got to be something we can do. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Kowalski standing on his porch, arms crossed, pride intact, about the Purple Heart plate, and the way the man had shaken his hand like sealing a contract, about his mom's words, being decent to people costs less than being cruel. At 2 a.m, Tyler got out of bed and opened his laptop. He started researching HOA laws in Ohio, looking for loopholes or protections for veterans. What he found wasn't encouraging. HOAS had broad authority to enforce their rules, and unless there was clear discrimination, residents had limited recourse. But then he found something else, a news article about a veteran in Texas who'd been facing HOA harassment and how his old military unit had shown up to help him fight back. Not with violence or threats, but with community pressure, public attention, and the kind of solidarity that made officials think twice about their decisions. Tyler stared at the article for a long time, an idea forming. It was probably stupid. It might not work, but it was better than doing nothing. He picked up his phone and texted Jake. You still have that contact at the local news station? The reporter who did the story on our business last year? Jake texted back immediately, apparently also awake. Yeah, why? Might need her number, and I need you to trust me on something crazy. How crazy? Really crazy. Tell you tomorrow. Tyler set down his phone and pulled up Google Maps, looking at Kowalski's street. Then he opened a new browser tab and typed in 4 words that felt both reckless and necessary. Hells Angels contact Ohio. Friday afternoon, Tyler finished his last scheduled lawn early and drove to Kowalski's house. The man was in his driveway working on his motorcycle, tools spread out on a towel. He looked up as Tyler approached, wiping grease off his hands. Need something? Kowalski asked, not unfriendly but surprised. I heard about the HOA situation, Tyler said. The fines, the harassment. I wanted you to know it's not right, and if there's anything I can do to help. Kowalski's expression closed off. I appreciate it, kid. But this is my problem. I'll handle it. How? Tyler asked, and the directness of the question made Kowalski pause. No disrespect, sir, but they're coming after you because they think you can't fight back. They think you're alone. I am alone, Kowalski said quietly. That's the way it is. Tyler took a breath. Do you still have my business card? Kowalski nodded slowly, pulling out his wallet and showing the card, still there, tucked behind his license. Can I borrow it for a second? Tyler asked. Kowalski handed it over, curious now. Tyler turned it over and wrote a phone number on the back. This is my cell. But more importantly, I want you to know that you're not alone. Not anymore. What does that mean? Kowalski asked. It means, Tyler said carefully, that sometimes when you help someone, they help you back. And sometimes that help shows up in ways you don't expect. He handed the card back. Trust me on this, okay? Kowalski studied him for a long moment. What did you do, kid? The right thing, Tyler said. I hope. He left before Kowalski could ask more questions, his heart pounding. He'd made 3 phone calls that morning, one to Jake's reporter contact, one to a number he'd found for a veterans advocacy group, and one to a phone number listed on a website for the Southern Ohio Hells Angels chapter, where he'd left a voicemail explaining the situation and asking if they knew Ray Ghost Kowalski, Vietnam veteran, and whether they'd be interested in a story about community and respect. He had no idea if any of it would work, but he'd learned from his mom that sometimes you had to try, even when the odds looked bad. Saturday morning started with a phone call that woke Tyler at 7 a.m. Unknown number. He answered groggily. This Tyler Mason? A man's voice, rough and direct. Yeah, who's this? Name's Reaper. I'm the president of the Southern Ohio chapter. Got your message about Ghost. Tyler sat up fast, suddenly wide awake. Yes, sir. I wasn't sure if... We know Ghost, Reaper interrupted. Rode with him 20 years ago, before his injuries got bad. Lost touch when he moved north, but he's still family. A pause. You really cut his lawn for free? Yes, sir. And this HOA is really giving him trouble? Yes, sir. They're targeting him because he doesn't fit their suburban picture, threatening fines he can't afford. Another pause, longer this time. You got a big street? Where Ghost lives? It's a cul-de-sac, Maple Street. Why? How many bikes you think that street can hold? Tyler's breath caught. I don't know, maybe 50? Good, Reaper said, because we're bringing 300. Be there tomorrow, noon. Tell Ghost we're coming. Tell him his brothers didn't forget. The line went dead. Tyler sat on his bed, phone in his hand, trying to process what had just happened. 300 motorcycles, tomorrow, on Maple Street. He called Jake, who answered on the first ring. Did you just... Yeah, Tyler said. Call that reporter. Tell her to bring a camera. This is going to be big. Tyler spent the rest of Saturday in a state of controlled panic, making calls and sending texts and trying to coordinate something that felt way too large for a 16-year-old to handle. He called the local police non-emergency line to give them a heads up about the motorcycle gathering, framing it as a peaceful veterans support event. He called Mrs. Nguyen and several other neighbors who'd been friendly to Kowalski, letting them know what was planned. And finally, at 4 p.m, he drove to Kowalski's house and knocked on the door. Kowalski opened it, looking tired. Tyler, what's up? I need to tell you something, Tyler said, and you're probably going to be mad at me, but I hope you'll understand why I did it. Kowalski's eyes narrowed. What did you do? Tyler took a breath. I contacted your old chapter, told them about the HOA situation. They wanted you to know. He paused, making sure he got the words right. They wanted you to know that your brothers didn't forget, and they're coming tomorrow, all of them. Kowalski went very still. How many? 300, Tyler said. Maybe more. They're riding in at noon. For a long moment, Kowalski didn't speak. His hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles white, and Tyler thought he might be angry. But when Kowalski finally looked up, his eyes were wet. 300, he repeated, his voice rough. Yes, sir. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I just thought... Kowalski pulled Tyler into a hug, sudden and fierce, the kind of embrace that spoke of things too deep for words. When he stepped back, he was wiping his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. You didn't overstep, kid. You did something I couldn't do for myself. You reminded me I still have family. Tyler felt his own throat tighten. They said you're one of them. That never changes. Kowalski nodded, composing himself. I need to make some calls. Get ready. Jesus, 300 bikes. He laughed, a sound that was half joy, half disbelief. Do you know what you just started? I hope I started something good, Tyler said. You did, Kowalski replied. You absolutely did. That night, Tyler barely slept. He kept checking his phone, watching as the plan took shape through a series of texts and calls that went late into the night. The reporter, Anna Chen, confirmed she'd be there with a camera crew. Mrs. Nguyen organized several neighbors to set up water stations and chairs. Jake's dad, who worked in city planning, quietly made sure the police presence would be respectful rather than intimidating. And somewhere out there, on highways and back roads across Ohio and neighboring states, 300 motorcycles were making their way toward a quiet suburban cul-de-sac where a veteran lived alone and an HOA president was about to learn a hard lesson about community. Tyler got up at dawn on Sunday and drove to Maple Street. The sun was just coming up, painting the identical houses in shades of gold and amber. A few neighbors were already outside, curious about the rumors that had spread through the subdivision overnight. Mrs. Nguyen was setting up folding tables with water coolers and disposable cups. Tyler helped her, his hands shaking slightly from nerves and lack of sleep. You did a good thing, Mrs. Nguyen said quietly. Ray is a good man. He deserves better than how he's been treated. I hope this helps, Tyler said. It will, she replied with certainty. Trust me. At 11:30, Tyler heard it, a distant rumble, like thunder rolling in from the west. It grew steadily louder, and people started coming out of their houses drawn by the sound. Tyler walked to the entrance of the cul-de-sac and looked down the main road. They came in formation, 2 columns stretching back as far as he could see. Harleys and Indians and custom choppers, ridden by men and women in leather vests covered in patches and pins and the stories of 1,000 miles. At the front rode a massive man on a blacked-out Road King, his gray beard braided, his presence commanding. That had to be Reaper. The first bikes turned onto Maple Street, and the roar became deafening, beautiful, a symphony of American iron that rattled windows and set off car alarms and announced, in no uncertain terms, that something important was happening here. Kowalski stood in his driveway, frozen, as the motorcycles filled the street around him. They parked in neat rows, engines shutting off in waves, and suddenly the suburban quiet returned, but different now, weighted with significance. Reaper dismounted and walked straight to Kowalski. The two men stared at each other for a moment, and then Reaper pulled Ghost into a crushing embrace. "Brother," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we got your six." Behind him, 300 bikers echoed the words, "We got your six." Kowalski was crying now, not trying to hide it, and Reaper kept one arm around his shoulders as he turned to address the crowd of neighbors who'd gathered, phones out, recording everything. "My name is William Reed," Reaper said, his voice carrying across the street. "Most people call me Reaper. I'm the president of the Southern Ohio Hells Angels, and I'm here to tell you about this man." He gestured to Kowalski. "Ray Kowalski, call sign Ghost, served 2 tours in Vietnam, saved 6 men's lives when his convoy got ambushed in '68, earned a Purple Heart and a Bronze Star, came home to a country that spit on him, and he never complained once." The crowd had gone silent. Even the kids had stopped playing, sensing the weight of the moment. "Ray rode with us for 15 years after the war," Reaper continued. "Was one of the best brothers we ever had. Life took him in a different direction, work, family, the things that happen. But we never forgot him. And when we heard he was being harassed, being targeted by people who think veterans don't belong in their nice neighborhoods, we decided it was time to remind everyone who Ray Kowalski is." He turned to face the houses directly. "He's a hero. He's our brother, and he belongs here just as much as any of you." Anna Chen, the reporter, was filming everything, her camera operator capturing wide shots of the bikes and the crowd, and Kowalski's tear-streaked face. From the back of the crowd, a voice called out, "This is a private neighborhood. You can't just—" Craig Denton pushed his way forward, his face red with anger. "This is intimidation. I'm calling the police." "Already here," said a calm voice. A police sergeant stepped forward, and Tyler recognized him as Jake's uncle, Officer Martinez. "And from what I can see, this is a peaceful gathering of veterans and their supporters. No laws being broken," Denton sputtered. "But the noise, the disruption, this is a residential area." "It's also America," Martinez replied evenly. "These people have the right to assemble. And frankly, Mr. Denton, I'd think twice before you try to shut down a veterans support event. Not a good look." Mrs. Nguyen stepped forward, her small frame somehow commanding attention. "Ray Kowalski has been my neighbor for 8 years. He's helped me more times than I can count. He's quiet, respectful, and he's never caused anyone a moment of trouble. The only problem here is the people who think he doesn't belong." Other neighbors started speaking up. A young mother whose son Ray had taught to ride a bike. An elderly man whose driveway Ray had shoveled all last winter. A teenager whose flat tire Ray had changed on a dark road. One by one, they told stories that painted a picture of a man who'd been quietly serving his community while the HOA was busy trying to drive him out. Denton looked around, realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its authority. "Yeah," Reaper said quietly, "it is." The gathering lasted 3 hours. The bikers brought food, set up a grill, and turned Maple Street into an impromptu block party. Kids climbed on parked motorcycles with their parents' permission, asking questions about engines and chrome. Veterans from the neighborhood, some who'd never spoken to Kowalski before, came over to shake his hand and share war stories. Tyler watched it all, amazed at how a single act of kindness had created this moment. Jake found him by the water table, grinning. "Dude, you did this." "We did this," Tyler corrected. "And really, Kowalski did it first. He just didn't know it." Around 4 o'clock, as the afternoon sun started to cool, Reaper called for attention. The crowd gathered around as he stood next to Kowalski on the driveway. "Before we roll out," Reaper said, "we've got some business to take care of." He gestured to a woman with close-cropped gray hair and sergeant stripes tattooed on her forearm. She stepped forward with an envelope. "Ray, we took up a collection," she said. "Brothers and sisters from 6 states contributed. It's enough to cover a year's worth of HOA dues, any fines they try to hit you with, and to get your house painted however you want it." She handed him the envelope. "You're not alone, Ghost. You never were." Kowalski took the envelope with shaking hands. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Reaper replied. "Just know your family." "Always have been." But Kowalski shook his head. "I need to say something." He turned to face the crowd, his voice stronger than Tyler had heard it. "Most of you know me as the quiet guy on the corner, the one with the motorcycle and the house that doesn't quite fit. I've been living like that a long time, keeping my head down, not making waves. I forgot what it felt like to be part of something bigger." He found Tyler in the crowd and gestured him forward. Tyler walked over, embarrassed by the attention. "This kid," Kowalski said, putting a hand on Tyler's shoulder, "mowed my lawn for free when I couldn't afford to pay him. He didn't know me. Didn't know me anything. He just saw someone who needed help and decided to do something about it. And because of that one act of kindness, all of you are here today." Kowalski's voice cracked. "I've spent a lot of years feeling forgotten, feeling like the world moved on and left people like me behind. But Tyler reminded me that decency still matters, that kindness is stronger than rules and regulations and people who measure your worth by your property value." He turned to Tyler. "You gave me back my family, kid. I don't know how I'll ever repay that." Tyler felt his own eyes stinging. "You already did, sir. You taught me that community isn't about who lives on your street. It's about who shows up when things get hard." The crowd applauded, and Tyler noticed several people wiping their eyes. Anna Chen captured it all on camera. Her own expression moved. As the bikers started preparing to leave, Tyler helped Kowalski say goodbye to each one. They came through in a long line, hugging Ghost, shaking his hand, making promises to visit and stay in touch. Tyler watched dozens of phone numbers get exchanged, plans for future rides get made, bonds that had frayed over the years get rewoven. Reaper was the last to go. He clasped Kowalski's hand and held it. "We'll be back next year," he said. "Make this an annual thing. The Ghost Run, we'll call it." "I'd like that," Kowalski said. Reaper turned to Tyler. "You too, kid. You're honorary family now. Next time we ride through, you're coming with us." "I don't have a motorcycle," Tyler said, smiling. "We'll fix that," Reaper replied, and Tyler believed him. The bikes fired up again, that magnificent roar filling the suburban afternoon one last time, and they rolled out in formation. Tyler and Kowalski stood side by side in the driveway, watching them go, and the street gradually returned to its usual quiet. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. It was fuller somehow, richer with the memory of what had happened here. The neighbors who remained were talking to each other, really talking, in ways they hadn't before. Mrs. Nguyen was inviting people over for tea. The young mother was organizing a neighborhood cookout. Small connections were forming, turning a collection of houses into something that resembled actual community. Craig Denton's house remained dark and closed, and Tyler heard later that he'd resigned as HOA president the following week. No one seemed sorry to see him go. That evening, Tyler drove home to find his mom waiting on the porch. Jake had apparently called her with updates throughout the day, and she wrapped him in a hug the moment he stepped out of the truck. "I'm so proud of you," she said. "What you did for that man." "I just mowed his lawn, Mom," Tyler said, but she shook her head. "You saw someone who needed help and you helped him. Then you saw an injustice and you fought it. That's the person I raised you to be." Tyler hugged her back, careful of her fragility, and felt something shift in his chest. He'd started the summer worried about money and medical bills, and whether he'd be able to save enough to make a difference. But standing on his porch with his mom, thinking about Kowalski and 300 motorcycles and a community that had learned to see each other again, he realized he'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't about how much money he could save. It was about what kind of person he wanted to be when life got hard. The following week, Tyler got a call from Kowalski. "Got a proposition for you," the veteran said. "I've been thinking about that lawn care business of yours." How'd you like a partner? Someone with tools, storage space, and a lot of time on his hands? Tyler felt excitement rise in his chest. Seriously? Seriously. You and Jake do the work. I'll help with logistics and equipment. We'll split profits 3 ways, and first cut goes to your mom's medical fund. Mr. Kowalski, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. That's what family does. Tyler found himself blinking back tears for the second time that week. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I'd like that. They worked out the details over the next few days, and by August, Tyler's lawn care had become Mason and Kowalski Grounds Maintenance, with a professional logo designed by one of the bikers' daughters and a new trailer provided by the club. Business tripled, driven by word of mouth from the story Anna Chen had aired on local news and the respect people had for the veteran-owned business. Tyler's mom started her new medication in September, paid for by the business, and a fundraiser the motorcycle club organized. The treatment was working, her symptoms improving enough that she could return to part-time work for the first time in a year. And every Sunday morning, weather permitting, Tyler would join Kowalski in his driveway to work on motorcycles. The veteran was teaching him to ride, patient and thorough. And by October, Tyler was confident enough to take his test. He passed on the first try, and Kowalski gave him a leather vest as a gift, simple and black, with a single patch stitched on the back. Honorary brother. The first time Tyler wore it, he felt 10 feet tall. In November, the HOA held new elections. Mrs. Nguyen was voted in as president, and her first act was to amend the bylaws to prohibit discrimination against veterans and to add language about community support over property aesthetics. The changes passed by a wide margin. Anna Chen's story about the motorcycle gathering and the teen who'd started it all was picked up by national news, and for a few weeks, Tyler did interviews and answered questions about kindness and community. He tried to redirect attention to Kowalski, to the bikers, to anyone but himself, but people kept coming back to the same thing. A 16-year-old kid who'd mowed a lawn for free and changed everything. Tyler didn't see it that way. He just saw a decision he'd made on a hot afternoon to help someone who needed it, and to trust that kindness would find its way back. On Thanksgiving, Tyler and his mom had dinner at Kowalski's house. The veteran had invited Mrs. Nguyen, Jake and his family, and half a dozen other neighbors who'd become friends over the past months. The house was full of laughter and food, and the kind of warmth that turned strangers into family. After dinner, Kowalski pulled Tyler aside to the garage, where his Harley sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "Got something for you," he said, pulling a tarp off a second motorcycle, smaller and older, but beautifully restored. "She's a '78 Sportster. Not much to look at, but she runs sweet. Figured you'd need your own bike for the ghost run next summer." Tyler stared at the motorcycle, throat tight. "I can't accept this." "You can, and you will," Kowalski said firmly. "You gave me back my life, kid." "This is the least I can do." He put a hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Besides, brothers ride together." "And you're my brother now. That's not negotiable." Tyler ran his hand over the Sportster's tank, feeling the smooth chrome, the solid weight of possibility. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." "Thank you," Kowalski replied, "for reminding an old man that he wasn't alone, for showing me what community looks like, for being the kind of person Margaret Mason raised." They stood there for a moment, two people from different generations bound together by a simple act of kindness and everything it had become. Then they went back inside to the warmth and noise and family, and Tyler thought about the summer morning that had changed everything, about how a decision to mow a lawn for free had led to this moment, this life, this understanding that the best investment you could make wasn't in your bank account, but in the people around you. The spring after Tyler's senior year, he got accepted to Ohio State with a partial scholarship. The rest was covered by a fund the Hells Angels had set up for children of honorary members. He cried when he got the letter, and his mom held him while he did. But before he left for college, there was one more thing to do. On a bright Saturday in June, 342 motorcycles rolled into the suburban subdivision for the first annual Ghost Run. They came from 8 states this time, bringing donations for local veteran services and enough barbecue to feed the entire neighborhood twice over. Tyler rode his Sportster in the formation, wearing his vest, feeling the power of the engine between his legs and the wind in his face. Beside him, Kowalski rode his Harley, and behind them, Jake had borrowed a bike from one of the club members, grinning like a fool the whole way. They rode through the streets of the subdivision, past houses where people came out to wave and cheer, past the corner lot where Kowalski lived with his yard perfect and his pride intact, past the future that had been saved by the simple decision to be kind when it would have been easier to drive away. At the end of the ride, they gathered in the high school parking lot for speeches and photos and the kind of brotherhood that transcends blood. Reaper stood at the front and raised his voice over the crowd. "We started the ghost run to honor Ray Kowalski," he said, "to make sure he knew he wasn't forgotten. But it's become something more than that. It's about remembering that we all need help sometimes. That community isn't about where you live or what you own. It's about showing up for each other when it matters." He found Tyler in the crowd. "This year, we're adding a scholarship. $5,000 annually to a student who demonstrates exceptional community service and character. And the first recipient is Tyler Mason, the kid who started all of this by seeing someone who needed help and deciding to do something about it." The crowd erupted in applause. Tyler walked forward, overwhelmed, and accepted the plaque and the check from Reaper's hands. But what he'd remember most wasn't the money or the attention. It was the way Kowalski was crying again, proud and happy, and the way his mom was beaming from the crowd, and the way Jake was hollering congratulations, and the way 342 bikers were roaring their approval into the summer sky. That night, after everyone had left and the subdivision had returned to its usual rhythm, Tyler sat on Kowalski's porch with the veteran and his mom, watching the sun go down over the houses. "You know what I learned this year?" Tyler said. "That being kind isn't weak. It's the strongest thing you can do." "Your mother taught you well," Kowalski said, nodding to Claire. She smiled, tired but content. "I taught him to see people." The rest was all Tyler. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. 3 people bound by circumstance and choice, by illness and healing, by the decision to help when help was needed and trust that goodness would find its way home. Somewhere down the street, a motorcycle engine roared to life, the sound familiar and comforting now, no longer strange or threatening, but part of the neighborhood story, part of what made this collection of houses into a real community. Tyler thought about the summer morning when he'd decided to mow a lawn for free, how that one choice had rippled outward, changing everything, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could build something beautiful and lasting. He thought about the business he'd built with Kowalski, about the college fund that would send him to school without debt, about his mom's improving health and the medication they could now afford. He thought about the honorary vest in his closet and the Sportster in the garage and the family he'd found on a suburban cul-de-sac where a veteran had once lived alone. Most of all, he thought about the lesson he'd carry into whatever came next, that dignity and respect cost nothing, that community is built one kind act at a time, and that when you help someone who needs it, you're not just changing their life, you're changing your own. The sound of distant engines echoed through the night, brothers heading home, family scattered, but never really apart. Tyler closed his eyes and listened and smiled and knew that he'd found something worth more than any amount of money he could have saved. He'd found what it meant to be part of something larger than himself. And it had all started with a lawnmower, a hot summer day, and the simple decision to be decent when the world gave him every reason not to be. That, he thought, was legacy enough for any life.